Hi, everybody. I realized you need a little bit more to be able to write for that essay. Two things you're going to like right away. Number one, by Thursday, 800 words by class time. So that does cut us down a little bit on the stress. All right. Number two, give you three templates right now you can use to make it a lot more friendly to get this thing done. Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's share. Let's get at. So here we go. Into the goodness. Let me just get this out of the way. My apologies. But I had it here. I want to talk about the Cascade question format in a little bit more of a structured form so you can see it. So the first paragraph, again, introducing the topic. I did add here that you would probably most likely logically add why you care or why we should care. So a bit of a sell there in the first two paragraphs. Should we write two paragraphs or one? Generally, two are better. Why? It's a little bit more of a nice warm up and it's a little less artificial. When you try to cram everything into one, it's a little bit rushed often. In other words, we're not marinating with enough facts or enough ideas of why this should matter and or what about it we can understand. Because if you give us context, we understand better, we can buy in better. So here's what I would often suggest in any of the essays in any of the formats. You just start with a statement, usually an assumption you push off of, or a neat fact or point that may not have been thought of before, something provocative. So there are lots of ways to write leads. We shared some of those in other classes. Go back over those notes if you'd like. Main thing is get our attention, drive into a little bit of how and why this should matter, and then land, of course, in this case, with that big question, right? At the end of that section, pose that first question and make it really pointed. And usually it's going to land at the end of a paragraph. In this case, I'm suggesting paragraph 2, even as you could do it in a single paragraph. All right, the next move, of course, we know we answer that question, and this box represents multiple paragraphs because we need to kind of work through that. I say multiple, could be 2, could be 5. Generally speaking, though, we do want to land to that second question within the second page in this format if you're doing a 5-page essay. And why? Well, simply because you just want to keep things moving, and you also want to drive us to what is really like the ultimate point. Usually the second question is what lands you more toward what we'd think of as a thesis, meaning something that has both an opinion and information that drives a little deeper. So you have a first take that logically leads to the second. The first one is not a prop. It is not something general that's not interesting, but you're showing correlations. And the beauty of this whole format is that it really drives you to have to keep thinking back to yourself about significance and thinking about relationships, because questions leading to other questions is the way life is. And it makes just for, I don't know, more an inductive read because you're reading through your mind's back door as you're processing here in a paper much more openly with the reader. In the conclusion, 3 options here. They're only options. Notice that word. And there's my conjuring, if you will, of a couple ideas you could do. So in conclusion, is there a third question now others could push further in the essay? Could you play up number 2, the context, that second bullet, complexity, more nuance, underscore that the answer is dependent on variables given a situation. You can go one way or the other, maybe thinking out loud about context. Number 3, share why this matters, get back to significance, get back to how you could personalize it, maybe refer back to your opening gambit if you made a point or story or reference. The main thing is, again, getting us back into why and how this is significant, possibly tying up, there's lots of ways to do conclusions, but possibly tying up a little more of your developed thesis. It's okay, but let's go back to that good old thing with the 5-paragraph essay. Is it all trash? No. It's saying we can use parts and we can flip them and use them or not. So, for example, in that opening, that question, that first question isn't really a developed thesis. It's more of a kind of get you in. The second question, a little bit more like a thesis because it's kind of coaching you. And here in the conclusion, we might kind of land much more emphatically, like here's what the point of the whole essay has been, or here's where we come to. So if you will, if you'd like to present that full polished last punch of point, you know, fully land your idea, that's a good idea often. Like, good God, why not, right? Make sure people go out with clarity. Depending on your style, depending on the mood, depending on the topic, you know, that's always a deal. Okay, let's move to the second possibility. Again, each of these are modular, and each of these are something, to excuse that, I don't know why it's doing that, but there's something that can be done or not. So let's look at the problem solution format. Play up the problem is the first move, and you can cross-reference that to the lecture we talked about. Number 2 in the box, again, Is this one or two paragraphs? Well, playing up the problem and answering and hinting how it's a possibility or opportunity, those two boxes generally are going to be resolved again in a 2-paragraph introduction. What we really did in last class, just transfer it in, right? Or just tune it up a little bit and you're fine. Third move here with defining the nature of the problem and the costs and consequences to health, time, money, resources, and you can add a lack of knowledge or loss of knowledge potentially, a loss of innovation, loss of health, anything like that. Most likely, loss of context, loss of understanding is going to be the main thing. That's mostly academic. When we make academics, if you will, problems, we're really saying, hey guys, there's should be more knowledge about it, should be explored. The field is less because we don't have that knowledge and we should push. Number 4, we referee the best solution. We have 2 solutions. We argue which one's most feasible, meaning most doable, or best to be done immediately. Do you need 2 solutions? No. Can you do one? Yes. Is it nice to have 2? Yeah, because it lets you have nuance and duke things out or think about how one's better than the other. Think about it. Again, everything is modular here, but you get the basic sequence, setting up the problem. Number 2, and that box, hinting how it's an opportunity, getting us to at least how you're going to spell out some solution in this essay. Then number 3, take time to develop the problem fully, show us how it is a problem. Number 4, drop us to the solution. Number 5, concluding the essay. Again, lots of options. Go back to the cascade conclusion. Same kind of thing, right? You suggest further details, implementations, potential savings. In this case, it might be going more to the practical implementation. All right, let's go back to option 3. This is the storifying option, similar to what we have had in the past, what we did in essay 1. We're just going to extend it a little bit more. So number 1, share about what you care about. What about you cares about this topic? Don't be indulgent, but maybe use a story or anecdote of yourself that you've had that kind of ties to what's going on that others people could say, wow, with you. In other words, the story and the opening is really showing style, nuance, personality, maybe humor, and you're gaming us a little bit in with a situation or story that you got or a moment that you had that really says, oh, hell yeah, I've been there before too. And it gets me to kind of smile alongside you or just experience what you want me as a reader to experience. The second move, and this could be after a couple paragraphs, depending on how much your story is, usually you don't want to have more than 3 paragraphs on any introduction in a typical 4 to 6 page range, because at that point you're like saying, where are we going? What are we doing? So usually you need to land the plane traditionally within college in 2 paragraphs. I guess we always can make the argument for 1. I get it. Both could work, but get us in. Shift forwardly, though, to your audience, the questions that motivate your project. Notice that this is interesting because it's a little amalgamation of the cascade questions. Do we have to actually ask the questions, or can you just say, I wonder about? Yeah, it's up to you, right? But the idea is at least that second move entertains thoughts of how and why you need to kind of work through something. All right, 3, we introduce our main sources. This one can be done earlier, but it needs to be done by here for sure. I think it's a proper placement, if you will. First story, get me in. Hey, get me thinking alongside you. Number 2, shifting forwardly to thoughts and why and how this is meaningful in terms of some questions. And number 3, here's the sources that are going to likely let me flow through this thought. How much do you have to introduce them? Not that much, but again, if we can do the skinny, quick moves that we did in the critical summary, maybe. How many sources do we have to have? Where do we get them from? Well, they obviously can be any of our readings in the course. Do we have to introduce them extremely formally? Well, we do need to introduce them like a little bit like the critical summary, because we are assuming the reader has not been familiar with Lamont or otherwise. So we still have to introduce Lamont, main thrust of the book, and the genre of the book. It's a writing. Oh, it's kind of interesting. I'll let you look it up because I don't necessarily want to call it a memoir. And I think I would see it as instruction or a creative writing book or book on writing, how to write, right? So that's easy enough. But the main thing there is you introduce the source and how you want to position them too, right? How it's going to help you kind of think through a couple issues you want to think through. So cool. All right. Last one, and this kind of runs through the rest of the paper, is we alternate short anecdotes and pull out paragraphs that state the point to be derived. So we kind of run a little bit of a thought with a couple quotes from the sources we've got, and or anecdotes, meaning short stories of ourselves that relate to the points. And then you play back and forth. Then you come to the next paragraph, you kind of interpret, hey, what does that mean? So very different than what you thought of, typical 5 paragraph essay. You jam it all in one paragraph. You kind of come in with the topic sense, then you come in with, introducing a sub point, then you come with the illustration, then you analyze it, then you put it back in the context of your thesis. Next paragraph. This one says, hey, I'm going to share a point. I'm going to develop it. I'm going to think out loud, maybe even not quite solve it. And then the next paragraph, I'm going to actually think about why and how that's significant. I actually use 2 paragraphs often to kind of do the processing. All right, cool. That's pretty much it, guys. I will next class do a relational map with y'all because I think it's a good space to do it. I mentioned that. The other thing I will be doing briefly in the class, and we'll let you guys out early too, is unless we want to counsel. But the other thing I want to do is talk a little bit about a pullover paragraph, what that looks like and all that. All right, good to have you guys hang in. We'll catch you. And if you got any questions or otherwise, hit me by Slack, email, and tomorrow office hours 9:30 to 1 o'clock. Take care. See ya.